It started as just another comedy segment on The Tonight Show, until Jimmy froze mid-laugh and the studio fell into the kind of silence that changes everything. What happened next wasn't television. It was a miracle unfolding in real time, broadcast to millions who had no idea they were about to witness the most powerful moment in late-night history. The Tonight Show studio buzzed with its usual Tuesday night energy. The Roots were warming up, audience members were settling into their seats, and Jimmy Fallon was doing what he did best, making people forget their troubles for an hour.
The guest lineup looked standard: a Hollywood actress promoting her new film, a comedian with a viral TikTok, and then someone the producers had listed simply as Sarah Martinez, community advocate. Jimmy had barely glanced at Sarah's pre-interview notes. Community advocate usually meant local charity work, maybe a feel-good story about neighborhood cleanup or youth mentoring, something light to end the show on a positive note. He had no idea that Sarah Martinez was about to change his life. Sarah walked onto the stage wearing a simple blue dress and a silver necklace that caught the studio lights. She was 43, with gentle eyes that seemed to hold both immeasurable sadness and inexplicable peace.
As she sat across from Jimmy's desk, something in her presence made the usual audience chatter die down naturally. "So, Sarah," Jimmy began with his signature enthusiasm, "tell us about the advocacy work you're doing in Phoenix." Sarah smiled, but it wasn't the practiced smile of someone used to television. It was the smile of someone who had learned to find light in the darkest places. "Well, Jimmy, it started 3 years ago when my son Alex was killed in a car accident. He was 22. The studio temperature seemed to drop." Jimmy's smile faltered slightly, not from discomfort, but from genuine recognition that this wasn't going to be a typical segment. "I'm so sorry for your loss," he said softly, his voice automatically shifting from entertainer to human. "Thank you," Sarah nodded. "But Alex's death wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of 5 other stories. We donated his organs, and tonight I brought some people with me who I'd like you to meet." Jimmy glanced toward his producers in the booth, but something in Sarah's voice told him to trust whatever was about to unfold. "Of course," he said, setting aside his prepared questions entirely. Sarah stood up and gestured toward the audience. "Could you come up here, please?" From different sections of the studio, 5 people began making their way toward the stage. A teenage girl moving carefully with a slight limp, an older man walking with quiet dignity, a woman in her 30s carrying herself with newfound strength, a middle-aged teacher with eyes full of gratitude, and finally, a young father holding the hand of a small child. As they gathered around Jimmy's desk, the studio fell completely silent. 300 audience members seemed to collectively hold their breath. Even the Roots had stopped their usual between-segment banter. "Jimmy," Sarah said, her voice growing stronger, "I'd like you to meet the people who are alive because Alex died." The camera operators, who had filmed thousands of hours of late-night television, found themselves adjusting their shots not for entertainment value, but for something far more sacred. This wasn't a segment anymore. This was testimony. Sarah placed her hand on the teenage girl's shoulder. "This is Emma. She's 18 now, a senior in high school. She has Alex's kidney." Emma stepped forward slightly, tears already streaming down her face. "I was dying," she said simply. "I had been on dialysis for 2 years. My family was planning my funeral when we got the call." Jimmy felt something shift inside his chest. This wasn't the kind of emotional moment his show usually created. This was raw, real, profound, in a way that made comedy seem suddenly inadequate. "And this is Robert," Sarah continued, indicating the older man. "He's a grandfather of 7. He has Alex's liver." Robert nodded at Jimmy, his voice thick with emotion. "I hadn't seen my grandchildren in months because I was too sick. Now I coach my grandson's Little League team." Sarah moved to the woman in her 30s. "Maria received Alex's other kidney. She's a nurse who was dying of the same disease she spent her career treating." Maria stepped forward. I kept working even when I was sick because I knew what my patients were going through. Now I can help them not just with medical knowledge, but with hope. The studio was so quiet that the air conditioning seemed loud. Jimmy realized he was gripping his desk, not from nervousness, but from the overwhelming weight of what he was witnessing. David here, Sarah continued, indicating the teacher, received Alex's corneas. He'd been blind for 3 years. David looked directly at Jimmy, tears streaming down his face. The first thing I saw when the bandages came off was my wife's face. I've been married to her for 15 years, but I'd never actually seen her. She was more beautiful than I'd ever imagined. Finally, Sarah turned to the young father. And this is Carlos. He has Alex's heart. The same heart that I felt beating under my hand when I rocked Alex to sleep as a baby. Carlos was holding his daughter's hand, a little girl who couldn't have been more than 5. My daughter here, he said, his voice breaking, she's never going to remember a time when Daddy was dying. Because of Alex, because of Sarah's choice, she's going to grow up with a father who can run with her, play with her, walk her down the aisle someday. That's when Jimmy Fallon did something unprecedented in his career. He stood up from behind his desk, walked around to where the group was standing, and without saying a word, pulled Sarah into a hug. But it wasn't a quick, camera-friendly embrace. It was the kind of hug you give someone when words aren't enough, when the only response to such profound loss and love is human contact. Sarah collapsed against his shoulder, and for the first time since her son's death, she allowed herself to grieve publicly. The audience rose to their feet, but it wasn't applause, it was reverence. People were crying openly. Camera operators wiped their eyes between shots. Even the crew members who had seen every possible variation of late-night television were moved to tears. Jimmy pulled back and looked at Sarah, then at the 5 people standing around them. I need everyone in this studio to understand what just happened here, he said, his voice carrying none of his usual comedic timing. This was Jimmy Fallon, the father, the human being who understood that some moments transcend entertainment. Sarah, you took the worst day of your life and turned it into the best day of 5 other families' lives. That's not just generosity. That's not just kindness, that's love in its purest form. He turned to address the camera directly, speaking to the millions of viewers at home. Folks, I've been doing television for 20 years. I've met celebrities, politicians, athletes, every kind of famous person you can imagine. But tonight, I'm standing next to the most extraordinary people I've ever met, and they're not famous. They're just human beings who chose to save each other. Sarah wiped her tears and stepped forward. Jimmy, there's something else. Alex was a huge fan of your show. He used to do impressions of your impressions. He was studying communications in college because he wanted to work in television someday. Jimmy's composure finally cracked completely. The man who had built a career on keeping audiences laughing was now openly weeping on national television. What would Alex think about tonight? He asked. He'd probably make fun of me for crying on TV, Sarah laughed through her tears. But he'd be so proud that his story was helping people understand how important organ donation is. Jimmy nodded and made a decision that would later be called the most important moment of his career. You know what? We're going to do something right now. We're going to turn this entire show into an organ donation registration drive. He looked directly into the camera again. If you're watching this at home, if you're moved by what you just saw, don't just feel good about it. Do something about it. Go to your state's organ donation website tonight. Register to be a donor. Because somewhere right now, there's someone like Emma waiting for a kidney. Someone like Robert waiting for a liver. Someone like David waiting to see again. The camera stayed tight on Jimmy as he continued. And somewhere, there's a family like Sarah's who's going to face the unthinkable. But they might also have the chance to make that loss mean something. To turn their goodbye into someone else's hello. Jimmy walked back to his desk, but instead of sitting down, he opened a drawer and pulled out his phone. I'm going to register right now, live on television. Because if we're going to ask people to do something, we should be willing to do it ourselves. For the next 10 minutes, The Tonight Show became something unprecedented, a live organ donation registration tutorial. Jimmy walked viewers through the website, answered questions from the audience, and shared his own fears and hopes about donation. The 5 recipients stayed on stage the entire time, talking to audience members, sharing their stories, hugging people who approached them. Carlos's daughter drew pictures for people while her father talked about the gift of life he'd received. But perhaps the most powerful moment came when Jimmy asked Sarah the question that everyone was thinking but nobody wanted to voice. Sarah, how do you do it? How do you stand here and celebrate Alex's death becoming other people's life? How are you not angry at the world? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady and sure. I am angry, Jimmy. I'm furious that my son died. I'm devastated that I'll never see him graduate, never walk him down the aisle, never hold his children. But Alex didn't die so that I could be angry. He died in an accident. What I do with that death, that's my choice. She looked at each of the 5 recipients standing around her. When I see Emma healthy and planning for college, when I see Robert playing with his grandchildren, when I see Maria helping other patients, when I see David looking at his wife, when I see Carlos's daughter drawing pictures with her daddy, that's when I see Alex. Not dead, not gone, living. The show ended not with Jimmy's usual monologue or musical guest, but with Sarah and the 5 recipients standing together as Jimmy read the names of people who had signed up to be organ donors during the broadcast. The number was climbing in real time on the screen behind them. 800 people, Jimmy announced. 800 new organ donors tonight because of Alex Martinez and his incredible mother. As the credits rolled, the camera stayed on the group. They weren't performing anymore. They were just standing together, connected by loss and love and the miraculous possibility of life continuing in ways no one could have predicted. The episode became the most watched Tonight Show in 5 years. But more importantly, it generated over 50,000 new organ donor registrations in the week following the broadcast. The story was covered by every major news outlet, not as entertainment news, but as a transformative moment in television history. 6 months later, Jimmy received a letter from a woman in Ohio whose daughter had been saved by one of those new donor registrations. The letter simply said, "Alex saved my baby. Thank you for helping his story save others." Jimmy framed that letter and kept it on his desk as a reminder that sometimes the most important thing a comedian can do is stop making jokes and start making a difference. The night Sarah Martinez walked onto his stage, she didn't just share her son's story. She changed what late-night television could be, because some stories are too important for laughter. Some moments demand more than entertainment. And sometimes the greatest gift a mother can give the world isn't her child's life, but what she chooses to do with his death. 3 weeks after the broadcast, something unprecedented happened. Jimmy received a call from the network executives. The Tonight Show's organ donation episode had been submitted for a special Emmy category that had never existed before: Outstanding Achievement in Social Impact Programming. But Jimmy wasn't thinking about awards. He was thinking about the notebook he'd started keeping on his desk, filled with letters from families whose lives had been touched by organ donation. Some were from new donors inspired by Alex's story. Others were from families who'd made the difficult decision to donate their loved ones' organs. And some were from recipients who'd been waiting for years and finally received the call. Sarah Martinez had become more than a one-time guest. She'd become part of the Tonight Show family. Jimmy invited her back every few months, not for ratings or content, but because her presence reminded everyone in that studio what they were really doing. They weren't just making television, they were creating moments that could save lives. On one of those return visits, Sarah brought something that made Jimmy stop mid-interview. She reached into her purse and pulled out a worn journal with Alex's name embossed on the cover. "He kept this all through college," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "I found it when we were going through his things. Jimmy, I think you should see what he wrote about you." Jimmy's hands trembled slightly as he opened the journal. Alex's handwriting was neat, careful, the writing of someone who chose his words deliberately. The entry was dated just 3 months before the accident. "Watch Jimmy Fallon tonight with Mom. She was having a hard day missing Dad, and Jimmy's monologue made her laugh for the first time in weeks. I know what I want to do with my life now. I want to work in television, but not just to entertain people. I want to create moments that matter. I want to be like Jimmy Fallon, someone who can make people laugh when they need to laugh and feel less alone when they need that too. Maybe someday I'll meet him and tell him how much his show means to our family." The studio fell silent as Jimmy read Alex's words aloud. When he finished, he looked up at Sarah, his eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. "Sarah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "Alex didn't just save 5 lives with his organs, he saved mine too. This journal, what he wrote about wanting to create moments that matter, that's exactly what you did that night. You brought Alex's dream to life." Jimmy stood up from his desk and walked to a cabinet behind his chair. He opened it and revealed something that made the audience gasp. Inside was a small glass case containing a single red rose, perfectly preserved, with a plaque that read, "In memory of Alex Martinez, who taught us that some gifts keep giving long after we're gone. I had this made after our first show together," Jimmy explained. "It sits here during every taping as a reminder of what we're really trying to do. We're not just trying to get laughs or ratings. We're trying to create moments that honor the memory of people like Alex." Sarah reached into her purse again and pulled out a small wooden box. "Jimmy, Alex would have wanted you to have this." Inside was a simple silver watch, nothing expensive or flashy, just a young man's everyday timepiece. Alex wore this every day. He said it reminded him that time is the only thing we can't get back, so we should use it to help other people. Sarah fastened the watch around Jimmy's wrist. "I think he'd want you to wear it during the show, to remember that every minute we spend together on this stage is a chance to make someone's life a little better." From that night forward, Jimmy wore Alex's watch during every taping. It became his most treasured possession, more valuable than any award or recognition he'd ever received. Audience members began to notice it, and soon, #AlexWatch became a social media phenomenon, with people sharing stories of how they were using their time to help others. The ripple effects of that original episode continued to expand in ways no one could have predicted. Medical schools began showing the broadcast in their ethics classes. Grief counselors used Sarah's words to help families understand that choosing organ donation wasn't about saying goodbye. It was about allowing love to live on in new ways. Emma, the teenager who received Alex's kidney, started a nonprofit organization in high school that educated young people about organ donation. She called it Alex's Legacy, and by her senior year, she'd helped register over 10,000 new donors. Robert, who received Alex's liver, began volunteering at the hospital where he'd been treated, spending time with families facing the same decision Sarah had made. His gentle presence and obvious gratitude provided comfort to people in their darkest moments. Maria, the nurse who received Alex's other kidney, started a support group for medical professionals who became patients. She understood the unique challenges of being on both sides of the healthcare system, and her group became a model that was replicated in hospitals across the country. David, who received Alex's corneas, became a spokesperson for eye donation awareness. He traveled to schools and community centers, sharing his story and helping people understand that sight is a gift that can be given even after death. Carlos, who received Alex's heart, started coaching youth baseball in his community. He told every team he worked with about the young man whose heart now beat in his chest and how that heart had given him the chance to be present for his daughter's childhood. But perhaps the most profound change was in Jimmy himself. The comedian who had built his career on impressions and sketch comedy found himself drawn to deeper conversations, more meaningful moments. His show began featuring more stories like Sarah's, not tragedy for tragedy's sake, but stories of people who had transformed their pain into purpose. The network executives noticed the shift in Jimmy's approach and, surprisingly, they supported it completely. The Tonight Show's ratings had never been higher, but more importantly, its cultural impact had never been more significant. Other talk shows began following Jimmy's lead, understanding that audiences were hungry for authentic human connection, not just celebrity gossip and promotional interviews.
On the one-year anniversary of Alex's story, Jimmy dedicated an entire episode to organ donation awareness. Sarah returned, along with all 5 recipients, but they weren't alone. They brought with them 20 other families who had been inspired by their story to make similar choices. The stage that night looked like a celebration of life itself. Families who had lost loved ones stood alongside people who had been saved by those losses. Children played while adults shared stories. Laughter mixed with tears in the most beautiful way possible.
Jimmy looked out at the assembled crowd and felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had started with one mother's decision to share her son's story. "Alex," he said, looking directly into the camera, "I hope you can see this. I hope you know that your dream of creating moments that matter came true in ways you never could have imagined." As the show ended that night, Jimmy removed Alex's watch and held it up to the camera. "Time is the only thing we can't get back," he said, echoing Alex's own words. "But love, hope, and the decision to help others, those things are eternal. They outlast time itself." The final shot of the episode showed the entire group, donors' families, recipients, medical professionals, and Jimmy himself, standing together in a circle on the stage. They weren't performing for the cameras anymore. They were simply human beings connected by the understanding that life's greatest meaning comes not from what we achieve for ourselves, but from what we give to others. That night, organ donor registrations reached an all-time high. But more than that, people across the country began having conversations about legacy, about how they wanted to be remembered, about what gifts they could give that would outlast their own lives. Jimmy Fallon had always been known for making people laugh. But on that Tuesday night when Sarah Martinez walked onto his stage, he learned that sometimes the most important thing a person can do is help others understand that even in death, love finds a way to keep living. 5 years later, the impact of that single episode continued to reverberate through countless lives. The Tonight Show had inadvertently created what medical professionals called the Alex effect, a measurable increase in organ donation rates that could be directly traced to that broadcast and its ongoing influence. Dr. Patricia Williams, who had been watching from her hospital that night while waiting for a liver transplant, became one of the program's most powerful advocates. She received her life-saving organ 3 months after Sarah's appearance and credited Jimmy's show with giving her the hope she needed to keep fighting during her darkest hours. "I was ready to give up," Dr. Williams shared during a medical conference where she presented research on the correlation between media representation and donation rates. But watching Sarah Martinez transform her grief into such profound generosity reminded me that miracles are still possible. They just require human beings who are brave enough to choose love over loss. The medical community took notice. Hospitals across the country began incorporating the Tonight Show moment into their family counseling protocols, using Sarah's words and Jimmy's response as examples of how difficult conversations about donation could be approached with both honesty and hope. Meanwhile, Alex's watch had become more than just a timepiece on Jimmy's wrist. It had evolved into a symbol that transcended the show itself. Watchmakers began creating Alex Edition timepieces, with proceeds going directly to organ donation awareness campaigns. The simple inscription, "Time given, lives saved," became a rallying cry for the movement. Sarah Martinez, now a full-time advocate and frequent keynote speaker, had written a book about her journey titled "When Hearts Don't Stop Beating." The memoir detailed not just Alex's story, but the stories of hundreds of families she'd met who had made similar choices. Jimmy wrote the foreword, describing how meeting Sarah had fundamentally changed his understanding of what television could accomplish. "Sarah taught me that the most powerful stories aren't the ones we write," Jimmy wrote. "They're the ones we live and then have the courage to share with others who need to hear them." The book became a bestseller, but more importantly, it became required reading in medical schools and social work programs across the country.
Sarah donated all proceeds to support families facing the organ donation decision, understanding that financial stress shouldn't compound emotional trauma during such difficult times. On a quiet Thursday evening, almost exactly 6 years after that transformative episode, Jimmy was preparing for another standard taping when his assistant handed him an envelope marked personal and urgent. Inside was a letter from a young woman named Jennifer, along with a photograph that made Jimmy's breath catch in his throat. The photo showed a healthy, vibrant 24-year-old woman in a graduation cap and gown standing next to a man Jimmy immediately recognized as Carlos, the father who had received Alex's heart. But it was the letter that brought tears to Jimmy's eyes. "Dear Mr. Fallon," Jennifer had written, "you don't know me, but you saved my life. I'm Carlos's daughter, the little girl who was drawing pictures that night 6 years ago when my daddy met you. I'm writing to thank you because I just graduated from medical school and I'm going to specialize in pediatric cardiology. I want to take care of kids whose daddies have sick hearts just like my daddy did. But here's the thing, my daddy never got sick again after that night. Alex's heart has been beating strong in his chest all these years, and it's been beating for both of them. Every time I put my head on my daddy's chest and listen to his heartbeat, I know I'm hearing Alex too. I'm going to spend my life making sure other little girls don't have to worry about losing their daddies to heart disease. Thank you for giving my family that night, and thank you for helping the world understand that love really doesn't end when life does." Jimmy read the letter 3 times before he could speak. Then he did something he'd never done before. He called Sarah Martinez directly, right there in his dressing room, and read Jennifer's letter to her over the phone. Sarah's response was immediate and filled with the quiet joy that had become her trademark. "Jimmy, do you understand what this means? Alex isn't just living in those 5 people we met that night. He's living in Jennifer's career choice, in every child she's going to help, in every family she's going to heal. This is how love multiplies across generations." That night's Tonight Show opened not with Jimmy's usual monologue, but with him reading Jennifer's letter on air, with her permission. The camera stayed tight on his face as he shared her words, and when he finished, the studio audience sat in complete silence for nearly 30 seconds before erupting in sustained applause. But Jimmy wasn't finished. He looked directly into the camera and spoke with the quiet authority that had become his signature when discussing matters of the heart. "Jennifer, if you're watching tonight, I want you to know something. You didn't just decide to become a cardiologist because of your father's experience. You decided to become one because Alex's generosity and your mother Sarah's courage created a ripple effect that's still spreading. Every life you save will be connected to that choice Sarah made 6 years ago. That's not just medicine, that's legacy in action." Jimmy paused, touching Alex's watch on his wrist. "And to everyone watching tonight, I want you to understand something fundamental about human connection. The decisions we make in our darkest moments, the choice to help others even when we're hurting, the decision to find meaning in loss, the courage to transform grief into generosity, those decisions don't just affect us. They affect people we'll never meet in ways we'll never fully understand." The episode ended with Jimmy sharing the latest statistics. Over 200,000 people had registered as organ donors as a direct result of Alex's story and its continued retelling. But more than numbers, the story had created a cultural shift in how people talked about death, legacy, and the ways love persists beyond physical existence. As the credits rolled that night, the camera lingered on a simple graphic. "In memory of Alex Martinez, and in honor of all who choose to give the gift of life." Below it, a single line that had become the unofficial motto of the organ donation movement. "Love doesn't end when hearts stop beating, it just finds new hearts to beat in." Jimmy Fallon had started his career wanting to make people laugh. But that Tuesday night when Sarah Martinez walked onto his stage carrying her son's story,
he discovered something far more powerful than comedy. He discovered that the greatest gift any human being can give is to help others understand that even in the face of unimaginable loss, love always finds a way to keep living, growing, and healing the world one heart at a time.